saying is that if you're not happy with the scientific evidence that people inherit genes via, people inherit traits via the genes that they get from their mother and father, from the sperm and the egg kind of joining together, forming the zygote.
Yes.
And that's the mechanism. And that's, if you aren't happy with that scientific evidence for that being the case, and you're more happy with
No. See, what you've done here is you've created a false dichotomy.
Okay.
I've not said I'm not happy with that.
Okay,
so you have to be diligent.
It's a bit of a contradiction.
You have to be. No, it's not a contradiction. Because what you're doing here, in logical terms, is called, you're denying the antecedent. You're saying if P is not Q, then Q is not P. Basically, what you're saying is if it's not this way, then it's not any way. What I'm saying is that this is a false dichotomy. There's no reason why we couldn't assume that, yes, there is a genetic element, which we don't deny at all. Okay. But that also, this, what the Prophet said, if we interpret it in the way that I've said, whoever ejaculates first, is also correct.
Okay, well, they're at kind of...
There's no contradiction.
They are, because
Why?
the genetic evidence is that kind of your phenotype, which is the kind of traits you exhibit, are determined by your phenotype, your genotype, which is the genes you have.
We're not saying that's not true.
So the genes will still be the same in the resulting zygote, whether the man ejaculates first or the woman ejaculates first.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
But
what I'm saying,
there's no kind of evidence to support.
There's no evidence.
Idea.
Okay, this is another logical fallacy. So today you've fallen into like almost 100 potholes. You've created a false dichotomy. You've made false presuppositions, and now the third fallacy is that you've said there's no evidence of something. So just because there's no evidence of something, does it mean that it's not true?
Okay, there is also evidence against it.
Even if, as I've explained to you before, even if there is evidence against it, there's nothing to say that evidence against it will be eternal, will continue forever. Now what I'm saying is, look, we don't need to continue talking about this anymore. I think you're clever enough to realize the flaw in the argument.
Well, no, it's more you just not being happy with science at all.
No, that's called a straw man now. So another logical fallacy, you fall into another problem.
You've said
misrepresenting someone's argument in order to win it.
At this earlier, you did say kind of science isn't eternal. I think it's the weakest evidence we could use.
No, what I did was I quoted 4 or 5 different evidences, and I said of those 4 or 5, science is the weakest. Do you disagree with that?
I am not for trying to find out about how our universe works physically, and this is that's not
what I was talking about. I'm saying generally. I made a generic statement. I said of all of the 4 or 5 different things, deductionism, mathematics, etc., science is the weakest. Do you disagree with that?
It depends what you're trying to find out about. So if mathematics is strong, but it's not strong at finding out what the actual universe is, then you need to use kind of physics.
Without mathematics, you can't do parts of science. You can't do physics.
I agree with that, but you can't use mathematics alone to find out about the universe. So,
okay, but
that's why I'm saying
you do understand that the argument.
I think we agree.
I think we agree. Yeah. So is there anything else you have in the paper that you wanted to address?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
The next one would be. Islam being slavery being permitted in Islam. So I spoke about this kind of a couple of months ago with Mansour and Sabur, and one of the claims that came up, and Shamsi as well, and one of the claims that came up was that they're more like servants. It's not as though kind of they were forced to be slaves.
So is your contention is that Islam forces human beings to be slaves?
Yeah.
Okay, in that case, I'll give you one piece of evidence. That's in chapter number 24, verse number 33 of the Quran, which talks about a process called mukataba. Mukataba is the idea that the slave, and they were called slaves at the time where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he came to forbid that. He said you can't call them slaves and you can't call masters. This whole thing, it cannot exist anymore. But those individuals who are, which you could say indentured servants, those individuals who were, let's say, trapped against their will, prisoners, if you will. They were prisoners who were captured as a result of wars, or they were already in the pre-existing slave trade before the Prophet Muhammad came. They could do something called mukataba. Now, what is mukataba? Mukataba is the idea that the indentured servant goes to the master and says to the master, I demand to be freed. Now, according to Tafsir al-Qurtubi, who is one of the main seminal tafsir, which is the exegesis, he says that if an indentured servant, someone who is referred to commonly as a slave, comes forward and says that I want to be freed and ransom myself, in other words, I want to pay, let's say, 100 dinar, and I'll ransom myself, there's two opinions among the classical jurists. One of them, which is attributed to the classical companion, to the companions, Umar ibn Khattab and Anas ibn Malik, is that if an indentured servant who's a prisoner in a home comes forward and says, look, I want to be free, yeah, here's a contract and I'll ransom myself for 200 dinar, yeah? In other words, I'm going to, like they do in America, you know, ransoming and all this kind of things in prisons. That what's necessary is that he has to do that. In other words, he has to be freed. Who says that? Al-Qurtubi says that in his tafsir as one of two opinions, and many others say that in their tafsir. Having said that, this would mean to say, and the only condition is in alama fihim khayra, if they know in them good. So in other words, if they are people that are not, let's say, murderers or rapists or someone who wants to create some kind of corruption in the land, they have good in them. If that condition is fulfilled, there's no reason to imprison someone in their house if they are telling them, the person, that they want to be free. So you could say from this perspective, Islam is the only religion in the whole world that has come to do away completely with the pre-existing slavery framework that we have.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of counter evidences here. Muhammad's wife,
go ahead.
Juwaria, is that how you pronounce her name?
Juwaria, yeah.
Juwaria.
Okay.
Was she not initially a captive who asked Muhammad, can I be free at first? And Muhammad said no. And then after that happened, her father came and tried to pay ransom to get her back. And Muhammad still said no. And then Muhammad married her.
This is... Well, there you go. Thank you very much.
Well, he still
hold on.
did not give her freedom when she first asked, though.
Hold on. No. This is... You have to understand things properly. Let's get a better example, a more profound example. Maria al-Qibtiyya. I'll take that as well. Okay. No problem. Maria al-Qibtiyya is Maria the Copt. Yeah, she was given as a gift to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she was a slave in the Egyptian Byzantine Empire. She was given as a slave by the Christians to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What he did is that he made her what you call Walad, which is that he had a child with her, which his name was Ibrahim, who died in his infancy, which gave her pretty much all of the rights of a wife. Because Walad in Islamic terminology means she gets all the rights of the wives. Now, the point is, you have to understand that because the Prophet Muhammad came in a place where there was slavery, you had to deal with the issue. Like Bilal ibn Rabah, he was a slave, the black man. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he bought him, he had to buy him in order to sell him. Same thing applies now with Maria al-Qibtiyya. The Prophet had to accept her as a gift in order to give her the rights of Walad, which means that he had to accept her as a gift first. He had to accept parts of the slave trade in order to fix it. So this is a realistic, practical, pragmatic way of dealing with the problem of slavery. Now you're here in the 21st century. Maybe your great-great-great-granddad was a slave owner. I tell you something, bro. If you look at let's be fair, and you're wearing the kind of hat that they used to wear in the colonial empire.
I just told someone I'd be wearing a straw hat, so this is so they can identify me.
No problem. Okay. I'm just having a joke with you, my friend.
Yeah, that's fine.
But what I'm saying is that the West, in order for it to come to a place where Islam came to, had to develop for 1,000. So basically, Islam was 1,400 years before the West in these things.
Well, abolition of slavery in many Arab Muslim countries didn't occur until 1960.
This is once
1928.
Yeah, it's true.
That was Iraq. 1960s is the Gulf states.
Okay, thank you very much. But I don't think
2000s. So.
Well, I mean, look. If Islam was going to be judged on what Muslims do, then I might as well tell you you've won the argument. Because
but he did kind of decide to say the West was 1,000 years behind Islam on slavery. So So I thought
what I'm saying is
kind of bring it into that realm. But we don't need to go there.
No, we do need to go there. It's a good thing you've said that, because now what you've done is you've created another straw man. And a straw man for a man with wearing a straw hat is something which is an easy. But basically, what is a straw man argument? A straw man argument is when you cannot deal with someone's main argument, they create another argument.
I'm still waiting for you to talk about
I'll tell you why is it, no, hold on. Why is it a straw man argument? It's a straw man argument because you're conflating what Islam is, which is primarily Quran and Sunnah, hold on, with what Muslims do. And I'll tell you something, if you do that, then I'll tell you, I'm not going to defend Muslims, because I know Muslims are sinful people that have done bad things in the course of 1,400 years. If I was going to stand here and defend Muslims, I would lose every argument. Do you know, I'm not doing that. Maybe not every argument, but I'd lose arguments. I'm here to defend Islam. So when I said the Western discourse, I was talking about the Western legal framework. Let me tell you something you didn't know. Did you know that after the abolition of slavery, even even up until the 1940s and into the Second World War period, that when they said the abolition of slavery, they didn't actually mean it in a full sense. And it was a clause in the law that the slave owner would be called now the boss, and he would continue having the slave in their house for 6 years. And this was called like an apprenticeship. It was referred to in British law as an apprenticeship. This was in 1940s. Now we're talking about, you said 1918 Muslim country. So here we're talking about something in the West that occurred, which is almost tantamount to slavery, which actually, if you think about it deeply, is more closer to our time than the Muslim world.
Like if that's true and not a slight misrepresentation of the kind of British and legal system, then okay, great. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. I'd have to go away and read up on it. Yeah,
no problem.
Okay.
Maybe I got the dates wrong. You can double check.
But in terms of Jawaria though,
yes,
kind of she did ask, please let me go free first. I believe that this is true according to the Islamic sources. And then her father did come and try and do the ransom process.
As I said to you before, the way it works generally in Islam, if the Prophet Muhammad, and you've admitted this yourself, is he married Jawaria.
In the end, yes.
No, not in the end. Generally, that was the procedure. It was leading to that.
Initially, she tried to
leave
Muhammad.
No, it didn't work like that. It didn't. He tried to leave. Where's the evidence for that? He tried to leave.
I'd have to. Okay. It's initially from Wikipedia, but
please.
No. But I think we'll find an Islamic source in the end, though.
But the thing is, you have to understand that Islam itself forbids forced marriage.
Yeah.
And there's hadith from the Prophet Muhammad himself, which says that if the woman doesn't consent to the marriage, then the marriage is invalid. So here we have to understand something, right? Generally speaking, you couldn't make the case here. It would be very difficult for you to make the case that Jawaria was being forced to be married to the Prophet Muhammad.
Well, no, I'm trying to make the case that it's an example where a slave in the possession of Muhammad asked,
not in the possession of Muhammad.
Or like a war captive that he possessed asked, can I leave?
No,
and he
what
said
happened was she was given full rights, as she would have to be given when she was married to the Prophet Muhammad. And as I said to you before, this was one of the strategies that was employed by the Prophet and all of the companions in giving, because you have to play by the rules. You have conventions of the time. You have slavery going on. How are you going to deal with it? You buy a slave, you sell the slave. You buy a slave, you free the slave. You buy a slave, you marry the slave. All of those things eventually lead to the freeing of the slave, which is the objective. So here, it's very difficult for us to make the argument, if we want to make the argument, that Islam actually is a system which it attempts to bring in slaves. That's an impossible argument to make. Especially in the Quran, it says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةُ فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. In chapter 90 of the Quran, what would make you know what the good way is freeing slaves.
Okay. Yeah. But so the best source I can find at the moment is from a book written by Rodinson, I suspect that kind of the source will eventually be Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham,
which is filled with weak hadiths, which we don't accept.
Well, it was before the first hadith collections, right?
No, I mean, the thing is you have to understand something. The books of Sirah, which means the biography of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they don't intend to only put in strong or authentic hadith. Okay, so the authors of such books, it's not within their remit to just put in strong hadiths.
Okay, yeah, they didn't do the full kind of process.
No, they don't do it. They didn't want to, because what they assumed was that in matters to do with history, that it's not needed to do that.
Okay.
Why? Because it's not going to have a practical implication on our creedal life. It's not going to change our creed, and it's not going to have a practical implication of what we do. So, in other words, the books of seerah, the books of biography, are filled with weak hadiths and sometimes even fabricated hadiths, which we don't accept.
Okay, if you don't want to accept that one, that's fine. Yeah, I don't mind.
Do you understand this point?
Yeah, I do understand. Okay, so
is there anything else you had on that notepad before we call it a good day?
Oh, I've got loads of things. Sorry, but
go on.
I'll choose just one more. Then.
Okay, one more.
Okay.
I think we've answered this question. One more.
Let's see here.
You feel like I've answered you? Be honest. You feel you're an open-minded guy.
Yeah,
do you feel like I've answered your questions?
We can maybe do a little summary at the end if you want to.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
And so the one more thing I guess I'll ask about is. Okay, so one good one. It's like related to the first one about the kind of sperm hadith, which is at odds with our understanding of science at the moment. So there's another kind of Sahih Muslim this time, Sahih Hadith 2361, in which the Prophet spoke to a fig farmer, and the fig farmer had kind of quite a strong tree and quite a weak tree, and the Prophet said, "Oh, why don't you crossbreed them together?" I think that would be a good thing to do. They did that, and they found that the resulting tree, didn't work. And the Prophet said, "Well, you know, like I know about things about religion. Don't sort of take my word for it about when I'm making claims about the world." That's
now you're misphrasing what he said. So let me give you the Arabic and translate it. Okay. What he said in the Arabic is, "Antum a'lamu bi umuri dunyakum," which is 4 words. Antum, you guys are more aware of the matters which concern your worldly affairs. What does this mean? I'll tell you what this means. First of all, you're right. The story is, the fertilization process and stuff like that. And then he told them, do this and don't do that, etc. This, from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, laid down a very important principle for us. The principle was that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, if he's going to speak from his own opinion, he will have to make it clear to the people that he's speaking from his own opinion. Generally speaking, he speaks from revelation. However, if he wants to have an own opinion on something, which he's entitled to do, he'll make it clear that this is not part of the revelation, and this is just my own opinion. Now, counter to that is another hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, where a man came to him and said that my brother has a bellyache. So, this time he told him ﷺ, go and eat honey. So the guy went and came back and he said, my brother's still got a problem with my stomach. He said, tell him to eat more honey, etc., etc., etc. He went around to and fro a couple of times. In this case, the Prophet was insistent. He said, the guy said, my stomach's still problematic, it's got problems. He said, no, that Allah has spoken the truth in so much as he said that honey was a cure for human beings. So in this case, he didn't say, Antum a'lamu bi umuri dunyakum. So this is an important principle in Islamic jurisprudence, whereby the Prophet has to make clear that which is concerning his own opinion and that which is not concerning his own opinion, which is coming from revelation. Here he made it clear. So the fact that the trees didn't
But he made it clear afterwards, didn't he? It was after the tree didn't work.
But why didn't he make it clear with the man with the stomachache with the honey?
Sorry?
The man who said that the honey's not working, and my stomach is in pain, Why didn't he say to him, "Anta a'lamu bi amri"?
So that time he decided to stick to his advice that time.
Okay, so this is showing us that in certain cases that you have to follow, or this becomes part of religion. So for us, we believe that honey has antidotal elements. It fixes your stomach or something. If someone came to me and said, "What about doing the fertilization the way the Prophet said?" We'll say, look, that was his opinion, which was not based necessarily on the revelation. It was his personal opinion.
It kind of leaves you able to say, anytime the Prophet says something, makes a claim about the universe, and it turns out to be correct, you can say, look, this shows that he's a prophet. If he makes a claim and the fig tree doesn't grow, then it's I'm just saying that you guys know better. And then you get
that point
discard the bad evidence.
It's not bad evidence. What I said to you before. There are two kinds of, because why did I give you the example of honey? The example of honey